So, it's like the end of December, and it's too early to make a video about the books that I read in December because I'm still finishing some books up. And since I'm still finishing books up, I don't want to talk about my favorite books of this year quite yet. So today, the video I'm doing is books that are a fucking nightmare. I love a book that's a fucking nightmare. So there are a lot of repeated authors here. There's a common theme going for a lot of them. So the first book that's a fucking nightmare is Glamorama by Bret, Easton, Ellis. This book, I had already read American Psycho, Less Than Zero, Rules of Attraction. Rules of Attraction isn't horrifying in any way though. But I had read those books, and this was the first book of his that actually scared me, and like I couldn't read it at night. I couldn't read it for too long because it just kept getting more and more horrifying. The first half is kind of tame, kind of strange, kind of nightmarish. I mean, there's piles of shit everywhere that only the narrator can see and smell. There's confetti everywhere. It's just very disorienting and like fever dream-esque. And then he gets to Europe and gets like forcibly recruited into this terrorist organization that are like actually committing terrorist attacks, and like the descriptions of death and bombings and all of these things, and the fact that he's being manipulated into being in this group because they torture people and then will edit the footage so it looks like he's the one doing the torturing so they can blackmail him. Like all of that, not just the horrible, violent descriptions of death and murder and torture, but the fact that he can't escape is what makes this, like, I was about to say awesome, but awesome in a terrible way. Following up with that is Lunar Park by Bret Easton Ellis, which is my favorite Bret Easton Ellis book, because this is also like a nightmare because there's an entity in fictional Bret's house. His house is slowly turning into his childhood home, and it's like this entity is the spirit of his evil father who inspired him to write a lot of his books. His father comes out and manifests himself in a lot of his evil and violent character. This is another strong contender for most nightmarish Bret Easton Ellis book. Next is kind of a surprising one. I just finished reading this, Convenience Store Woman, and I'm probably going to talk about it a little bit more in a December reading recap video. First of all, I work in a store, and I feel like I can't escape working in the store. So that in itself, like I always feel like that episode in Coven in American Horror Story when they have to go to their own version of hell and bring themselves out of it. And I can't remember her name, but she's like working in the chicken shop, and like there's an endless line of customers and people are rude. Like that's what my everyday feels like when I go to work. And then that is this, except she enjoys her job. So that's like more of a personal nightmarish thing for me. Like working in a fucking store, hearing the scanner, she feels like she only can be a functioning member of society if she's working in the store. So that's not super nightmarish unless you're me. But then she basically starts living with this incel, and when she stops working at the store, her life is a nightmare. Like she doesn't know what to do with herself. She doesn't understand like the basic functions of human life. She doesn't know why she should eat or sleep if she's not gonna go to work. And she's just living with this guy who's leeching off of her, forcing her to go find a job that she's like probably mentally not capable of doing. And at the end, she's able to escape it and go back to what she's always wanted to do, which is nice. But I would still put this in the nightmarish category. It doesn't have to be scary, you know? Next, I have Vladimir Sorokin's The Blizzard. When there's an endless journey, a literal odyssey, where every step of the way there's an obstacle to overcome, one of the main obstacles being actual freezing cold and snow, when you're traveling in the darkness on a sled pulled by 50 mini horses, that's a nightmare. I would never ever want to be in this book, in this man's position. And there's a scene in this book where him and his travel companion, they stop and encounter, I don't even know how to describe it, because I don't really remember if they were described as looking any different from humans, but they were like a special type of like alien type of human that has like these crazy drugs or whatever. So they invite the doctor and they offer him a sample of their new drug, the pyramid product, and he does this drug, and all of a sudden he wakes up and he's inside of a cauldron full of sunflower oil, tied down to the bottom, completely tied up with his wrists touching his ankles, tied up. And he slowly starts to feel the oil getting hotter and hotter, and he's trying to balance, he's trying to push off of the bottom. And I was reading it and I felt like so much despair. And I'm not gonna spoil it, like what happens after. Just reading that is horrible. And then he continues on his journey and you're always feeling kind of optimistic, like, okay, you know, he overcame that. And then the end is so, you're just like, what the fuck was the point? Like, oh my god. It made me really sad and it made me feel so like, ugh. I mean, that's why I love this book. Like, it's a good book. But right here I have The Idiot by Dostoevsky. And mind you, I haven't read this in a long time, so I'm really not remembering all too much about like the actual plot. But I mean, here I have Notes from Underground and The Adolescent. And The Adolescent and The Idiot, I wouldn't say are explicitly like stressful or nightmarish in the way that Notes from Underground is. But these two books, it's like the constant miscommunication and misunderstanding and complicated aspects of Russian society and the way people need to maneuver those relationships, and then the slight sprinkles of like horrible things that just happen in life, like a young girl fucking hanging herself, I think is what happens in this book. It's either she hangs herself or her mother hangs herself. I'm pretty sure the daughter hangs herself because it was really horrific and sad. Like, those types of things give these books a nightmarish quality. So I'm including them because it doesn't have to just be scary and violent, you know what I'm saying? It's something that like you're reading it and you're glad that you can just close the book and be in your regular life and not have to deal with what the characters are dealing with. So I have Amerika by Kafka and The Castle by Kafka. And The Castle I have not finished completely yet. Just from the beginning, it was almost unbearable how our narrator cannot find his way to the castle, find somebody that he can speak to. It's again like the inability to communicate with people that you have to communicate with to proceed in life, basically. Like, that is what makes it feel like a nightmare, that you're just like stuck in this endless loop. He's calling people, he's writing letters, he's not allowed to stay at the inn because he doesn't have permission. All of these types of things that kind of mirror the isolation and rejection of Jews in Kafka's time, because he lived in Prague and he spoke German, but he was Jewish and his parents spoke with an accent and they never really truly fit into society. So I think that really plays a role in like these kinds of situations that he creates. And then here we have Kafka's Amerika, where our narrator goes to Amerika. And I say this is like nightmarish because Kafka had never been to Amerika, so his descriptions of Amerika feel like an actual fever dream, like topsy-turvy, strange. And again, it's like the struggle to find work, to save money, to find people to trust. And then our narrator, he follows one of his companions to an apartment where he gets to stay, but then he cannot leave. And it's so high up that it's not like he can escape. Like, he's just trapped at the top of this tower with this incredibly strange and demanding woman, and then a man that will do anything for her. Sometimes he's just banished to the balcony and he can't come back in. So I was reading it and again, it's like that feeling of despair, like, ugh, thank fuck that is not my life. So, and then of course, how could you not include the metamorphosis? I mean, I don't even want to talk about it because it still saddens me so much that somebody would have to like not only experience being turned into a bug and having no hope of returning to their original form. Not only that, but then just like having a family who is actually the fucking worst. Like, his family represents like actual insects, parasites leeching off of Gregor, and Gregor is the only truly human, caring person in the household, and he is betrayed in my eyes. He's completely betrayed by his family, and he becomes such a nuisance to them that they think it's even better for him to just die, and they don't think that he can actually understand what's going on, or like that he's no longer retaining any of his humanity. So the fact that he dies in such a sad, slow way after his father throws that apple into his shell and it starts rotting inside of his body, it just devastates me every time I think about it. So this is included. And then lastly, Pale Fire. I would put this in the nightmarish category because you're reading it, you know, you get past the poem and then you get to the actual prose. You're following the story, and slowly you start to realize that you're reading an unreliable narrator. And then the ending just rushes towards you, and you realize the person that you thought you could trust in this book is actually not only fucking crazy, but the fact that he is the murderer of the man who he speaks so highly of. Like, discovering that just like made my stomach drop, and it made me feel so unsettled and so So that's why I'm placing this in this category as well. So yeah, we're scared.